Thank you so much, Chairman Jordan and other distinguished committee members. I am so grateful for your eloquent, fervent commitment to freedom of speech, especially on college campuses where it's particularly important, and for including me in these important hearings. As the opening statements have made clear, all of us share a general, neutral commitment to freedom of speech in the abstract. But the difficulty is when we hear ideas that we hate. It becomes very hard, as Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes enjoined us all to do, to defend freedom even for the thought that we hate. So I urge all students and others on campus to respect freedom of speech for speakers they strongly disagree with. But I also, picking up on the point that Mr. Krishnamurti made, also firmly defend freedom of speech for protesters, for peaceful, non-disruptive protesters against those speakers. This is the genius of the First Amendment. I share the concern that Ms. Demings raised, and also that Mr. Jordan raised, about violations of law. You know, the legal infractions, the crimes that were committed against the administrators that we saw, but crimes, including hate crimes that are committed against students. We do not need to choose between robust freedom of speech and these countervailing concerns of equality and respecting law and order. The question is, what is the appropriate response to ideas that we disagree with, including hateful ideas? And here, I'm happy to say that the Anti-Defamation League, the Southern Poverty Law Center, the ACLU, we are all on the same page that we need not and should not sacrifice robust freedom of speech in order to counter hateful ideas and hate crimes. In fact, the appropriate answer, as the Supreme Court has said, is more speech, counter speech. And interestingly enough, evidence demonstrates that it is far more effective than censorship in robustly, effectively countering ideas that we disagree with. I'm working on a book right now, and this is the whole theme of the book, summed up in the title, Hate, all caps, because that is a very serious problem in this country. But the subtitle is Fighting It with Free Speech, Not Censorship. And we really have to educate the activists, the students on today's campuses. I have to say, as an activist from the 60s and 70s, I'm thrilled by the resurgence of student activism in support of racial justice and social justice. I'm really heartened by their bringing in voices who were traditionally marginalized and disempowered. But I am disheartened by their apparent belief that freedom of speech is an enemy. Nothing could be further from the truth. The whole struggle for racial justice throughout the history of this country, starting with the abolitionists, going through the civil rights movement, and every movement for social justice, including for women's rights and LGBT rights, has depended critically on robust freedom of speech, including for ideas that were controversial and hated. Now, in addition to misunderstanding how essential freedom of speech, including for hated ideas and hateful speech, is, there's too much misunderstanding about what the First Amendment actually means. We hear too many statements about so-called hate speech, which, by the way, it's not a legal term of art. It has no accepted definition. So it is generally used to describe speech that conveys hateful ideas on the basis of certain personal characteristics that traditionally have been bases of discrimination: race, religion, gender, and sexual orientation, among others. We hear constantly statements that hate speech is not free speech. Absolutely wrong. But we also hear equally incorrect statements that hate speech is absolutely protected. Also equally wrong. The genius of our Supreme Court decisions on this issue, and here the court has been very unified from right to left, setting a model that we should all emulate in the rest of the world. This is not a partisan or ideological issue. They have laid down two core free speech principles. One, when hate speech or any other dislike speech may not be punished, and one, when it may be punished. And I think they are brilliant and make great common sense, including in this context. Number one, speech may never be censored just because we revile its ideas. That's called viewpoint neutrality. Number two, and this picks up on points that Ms. Demings in particular made, and was also made by other speakers, the opening speakers, that if the speech does cause what is often called a clear and present danger of harm, including instilling a reasonable fear that you will be attacked, the incidence of the nooses. That constituted targeted harassment and threats, which may and should be punished consistent with existing free speech principles. So I think if people understood both the common sense distinction that our law draws between protecting ideas that we hate versus not protecting, but strongly punishing speech that actually directly causes imminent serious harm, then there would be much more acceptance of it. And I'd like to, and support for it neutrally. I'd like to end by quoting, there are so many that I could quote, prominent minority leaders who recently have spoken out against censorship on campus, not only because it is wrong in principle, but also because it is disempowering to the student activists who are seeking greater justice. And there are many examples. One would be former President Obama himself, but I'm going to quote somebody who was actually a university president. Ruth Simmons, former president of Brown University, the first African-American president of any Ivy League university, and the first female president of Brown. She said, "I believe that learning at its best is the antithesis of comfort. So if you come to this campus for comfort, I would urge you to walk through yon iron gate. But if you seek betterment for yourself, for your community and posterity, stay and fight." Thank you.